Hey, what's going on, guys? So I have a new project series for you. We're going to be building an Angular application from scratch using the new FireStore cloud platform from Firebase. Now, FireStore allows you to store, sync, and query data for web applications or mobile applications, and it's supposed to be really scalable as well as really fast. And I've had quite a few requests for this, especially from people that went through my Angular 4 Udemy course, where we used Firebase to build a pretty decent sized application. And if you want to get into things like Firebase authentication and stuff like that, I'd suggest checking that course out. I'll put a promo link in the description. Alright, so this is the application here. It's basically just an item manager. Now you guys can use posts or users or whatever resource you want. I just chose items just to have something very general that you guys can build off of. Alright, so we're also using Materialize CSS for the CSS framework. And if we want to add an item, we can go up here and we'll say item 5 for the title, and then we have a description. We'll just say this is item 5 and submit, and you can see it gets added down here. Now if I go and I look in my FireStore backend, you'll see that it's added in real time. I didn't even have to reload. Let's see, where is it? Right here, item 5. Alright, so each item will have a unique ID generated by Firebase, and it'll also have a title and a description, which you just saw me enter. Okay, so in addition to adding them, obviously we can read them and list them, and then if I click on one of these icons over here, these edit icons, it'll pull down a little form and we'll be able to update the item. So let's change this to item 5, and this changes as I type right here, because we have our two-way data binding with Angular. And by the way, we're using Angular 4, but when Angular 5 is released with the CLI, you can use that as well. There's nothing particular to Angular 4 that you can't do with Angular 5 here. So we'll change this to, I don't know, we'll just say updated item, just to show you that we can change it. And then we'll click update, and you can see that that's been updated. Alright, and if you want to delete it, you can click on the edit icon again, and you can click on delete item. You can also double click the item itself to delete it. Alright, and you can see that that's been updated in FireStore as well. Alright, so that's what we'll be building, guys. So the very first step is to create our FireStore, so that's what we're going to do next. Hey guys, if you've been watching my videos for a while and you really like what I do and I've helped you out a lot, consider becoming a patron. Even for $1 per month, it pushes me to keep bringing you guys the best content I possibly can. There's reward tiers for discounts, free Udemy courses, personal support, and more. So check out the Patreon link in the description below for more info. So to create a FireStore, you're going to have to log into firebase.google.com and log into your console. Okay, so from the home page, you'll see a console link up on the right here, and then you should see a screen like this. So I already have this FS1 dev database. That's what I created to create the the initial app. But I'm going to start from scratch. So we're going to click Add New Project, and we're going to call this, let's call it FS1 prod for production, and then create project. Alright, and that's going to generate everything for us. And just because you use FireStore doesn't mean that you can't use, Firebase authentication or storage or all that stuff. Alright, it's just using the FireStore instead of the real-time database. Alright, so once that's set up, you'll get your standard Firebase backend, but what we want to do is go over to database, and then instead of choosing the real-time database, we want to choose the cloud FireStore. So we're going to click try FireStore beta, and at the time you're watching this, it may not be in beta anymore. Alright, now this right here is asking us if we want to start in locked mode. That means that we have to authenticate through Firebase to actually read or write to our data. Now, I'm not going to get into authentication in this tutorial, in this series. If you really want to get into Firebase authentication, again, I would suggest watching the Angular front to back Udemy course. Alright, so we're going to choose test mode so that we can publicly read and write to our database, and we'll click enable. Alright, and authentication doesn't change whether you're using real-time database or a FireStore, it doesn't matter. All right, so once that's set up, you'll see a screen like this. Now, what's really nice about FireStore is the interface it gives us to actually add data. When we use the regular real-time database, we actually have to just add custom JSON, which is kind of annoying. So we can just click Add Collection here, and we'll say Items, Next. And then for the document ID, we're going to leave it to Auto ID, to auto-generate. And for the first field, we want Title. We can choose the type. Okay, so you have all these different types. We're going to choose a string though. And then the value, I'm just going to say item 1. All right, so we want one more field. I'm going to click Add Field. This is going to be the description. It's going to be a string, and it's going to say this is item 1. All right, then we'll click Save, and that will create our document for us. Okay, you can see it has its own unique ID, a title, and a description. So let's click Add Document again. We'll create one more. We'll say Title, item 2. Click another field. This will be Description, and we'll say this is item 2, and save. Okay, and that's it. Our FireStore is now set up, and we're ready to create our Angular application. All right, guys, so now what we need to do is generate our Angular application with the Angular CLI. Okay, now the main module we're using to interact with Firebase or FireStore is this AngularFire 2. So there's a lot of good documentation here. We're not following it to a T. For example, they show you how to bring it into a component here. We're actually going to create a service, which is a better thing to do because then your service is expandable across all of your components rather than just, bringing in the what you need from AngularFire in every single component so you don't repeat yourself. So we'll do things a little more difficult, but much more efficient. So let's generate our application. Now you're going to need the Angular CLI. To get that, you want to do npm install -g for global, and then the @ Angular/CLI. And I'm sure most of you guys know this if you've ever worked with Angular before. But yeah, this will make it so that we can generate any Angular application from any directory. All right. So I'm going to create my project folder here in my Dropbox code prod folder. And to create a new application, we just need to do ng new and then the name of the application. In this case, I'm going to call it Angular FS or Angular FireStore. Okay, and that'll generate the folder and all the main Angular files. It'll create the source folder with the app folder inside of it. It'll have the core app component, and then we'll create components to nest into that component. All right, and then we'll create our service, and there's a bunch of things we need to do. Hopefully it's not too confusing. Like I said, if you've used Angular before, you shouldn't have any issues. If you haven't, I'll try to explain things as well as I can. But if you're absolutely new to Angular and you've never used it, I would suggest watching at least the Angular 4 in 60 minutes video before watching this. All right, so now that that's done, we're going to just cd into the folder we created, which is Angular FS. And I'll just clear that out. So from here, we should be able to generate, or not generate, but run our application with the dev server, and we can do that with ng serve. And then if we want that to open automatically, we can do -- open, and that should open it on port 4200 by default. Okay, so there's our default Angular application. Now what I want to do is, now that we know that it's working, we're going to stop it with Control-C, and we're going to install some dependencies. All right, so we're going to have a couple front-end dependencies like Materialize CSS we're going to use for our framework, our CSS framework. We're going to need jQuery because it's a dependency of Materialize. And then I'm also going to use Font Awesome, which is an icon library. So let's install those with npm. So we'll say npm install. Now, if you're using npm version 5 or later, you don't have to do -- save in order to save your dependencies to your package.json file, but I usually use it just in case, especially where I do videos, and a lot of you guys may not have npm 5 or later, so I'm just going to include it. But let's do materialize -css, jQuery, and font awesome. Okay, so we'll install those three things. All right, and then let me just clear this out. There's two other things we need to install, and that is Firebase, okay, the Firebase module itself, and then AngularFire 2, which is, you know, the connector between Angular and Firebase. So we need both of those installed. And AngularFire 2 is very, very powerful. We can do authentication, we can do you know, real-time databases, FireStore, basically anything to do with Firebase, storage, file storage, all that. All right, so that should do it for dependencies. Now what I'm going to do is open this folder in my text editor. I'm using VS Code, so I'm able to just do code dot, and that should open it up in VS Code. All right, so from here, what I want to do is take the scripts and style sheets that we just set up, like Materialize and jQuery and Font Awesome, and we're going to put them into the Angular CLI.json file. Okay, there's a place for styles and for scripts, and as you can see, there's a default style sheet included with Angular. That's actually this source assets. Oh, where is it? Right here, styles.css. So it includes that. In addition to that, we're going to put a comma and we're going to include Font Awesome, which is going to be .. in the node modules folder in Font Awesome. Let's see, Font Awesome / let me just check this, the exact location. Let's see. All right, so it's going to be Font Awesome / CSS / font awesome.css. So we want that file loaded or included. Then we want the materialized CSS, which is .. node modules / materialized -css / dist / css / materialized.css. All right, so those are the styles. Now in the scripts, we first want to include jQuery. So again, it's in the node modules / jQuery / dist / jQuery.js. And then finally, we want the materialized JavaScript file, which is in materialize-css / dist, and then JS, and then materialized.js. All right, so those are all the scripts we need. Let's save this, and then we're going to run the server again. So let's go back to git bash or whatever terminal you're using, and we're just going to run ng serve. And now all those scripts should be included, and we should see this change a little bit because of the Materialize framework. All right, so now you can see that the fonts are much bigger, so things have changed a little bit. And then just to check, you want to do an F12 to look at your console, make sure there's no, missing jQuery or anything like that, any errors like that. So we should be all set. We can close this file up. Now, like I said, I'm not going to go through the very basics of Angular. If you don't know anything about Angular 4 or 2 or 5, anything but AngularJS, I'd suggest watching the Angular 4 in 60 minutes. But basically, we're going to go into the source folder and then app, and then app.module.ts. So this is basically like a meeting place for everything. Any component you create, any service, any module you bring in has to go into this file. All right, and then it has to be imported and put into where it's supposed to go in ng module. For example, components go into declarations. When we create a service, that goes into providers, and then modules go into imports. All right, so AngularFire has some stuff we need to bring in. If we look at the documentation here, let's see. There's actually a lot to this. Getting started with authentication, we don't want that. Installation and setup, let's take a look at that. So we've already installed it, we've already done that. All right, so right here, now in order to basically link our FireStore with our application, we need to include this object here with the API key, the auth domain, all this stuff, and they recommend putting it in your environment TS file. So what we're going to do is go into environments and then environment.ts, and we're going to, inside of this const environment, let's put a comma right here and we'll say Firebase, and that's going to be an object. Okay, and then we can get this stuff from our FireStore. If we go back to our Firebase here, you know what, I'm going to just make this bigger just so we can see things better. And if we go to, let's see, overview, make sure you're in your the right project. Mine's FS1 prod. And then click on this icon right here, and this will give you all of your information, your API key, everything you need to put in that object. So let's copy that, and we're just going to paste that right in here. All right, so make sure it looks like that, and make sure you use your own information, not mine. So we'll save that. Okay, so that puts everything in that file. Now we have to import that file. If we go down here, you'll see we're importing environment from that environment file. So I'm actually just going to copy that, and let's put that right there. We'll make this bigger too. All right, so we're importing environment, and then there's some other things we need to import. We need AngularFire module, which comes from AngularFire 2. So let's grab that as well. And you can either you can copy it from here, or you can just type it in. Now this is just AngularFire itself. We're also using FireStore, and there's a separate module we need to import, which is Angular FireStore module. So let's do that as well. So import Angular FireStore module, and that's going to be from AngularFire 2 / FireStore. Okay, and then if you wanted authentication, then you would bring that in separately as well. But we're not going to get into authentication in this particular project, at least up to this, at least to the point that I have it. All right, so let's see. We'll go back here, and you can see that they're adding AngularFire module .initialize app to the imports, and then they're passing in that Firebase object from the environment file that we put in. So let's go ahead and do that. So in the imports, we'll put a comma here, and we'll say AngularFire module, and then we want to call initialize app, and we want to pass in environment.firebase. All right, and then a second parameter of the app name, which is in this case AngularFS. Okay, so that'll import Firebase and everything that's needed. So we also want to bring the AngularFire store module into the imports. So we'll put a comma here, and we'll say AngularFire store module. Okay, just that. We don't have to add any extra method or anything like that. So that's pretty much it as far as bringing in AngularFire into our app.module file. So let's save this. Make sure we have no errors in our application. Okay, it's still running, good. All right, now if we go into app, you can see we have our app.component.ts file. This is our main app component. And then we have our HTML, app.component HTML file, which is what you're looking at right here. So I'm going to clear all this stuff out. We don't need any of this. So we'll get rid of it and save, and you can see that it'll just auto-upload or auto-load. Okay, now we're going to need a component to display our items from Firebase or from FireStore. So let's generate a component. So what I'm going to do is open up my integrated terminal. Okay, you can do this through your command line or your regular terminal. I'm using VS Code's integrated terminal, and you can open that with Control- or View integrated terminal. And from here we're going to say ng for generate component, and we want it to go into the components folder and then call this items. So we'll run that. Okay, and then what that did is it created a components folder in our app folder, and then we have an items folder with items component TS, that's our main component class, and then also the HTML file, which is the view. Those are the two files you need to worry about with your components. We're not dealing with the CSS or the spec test file, just those two. All right, now I want this items component to display in the main app component. So notice that it has a selector of app items. That means that we can display it with this selector. So let's go back into the app component HTML file and just put in app-items as a custom HTML tag or as a directive. And we'll save it, go back, and now we get items works. Okay? Now I just want to wrap this in a container. Okay, we're using Materialize CSS, and it has a class of container, which will just kind of push everything into the middle. So we want to wrap that like that. Okay, and that'll push it over to the middle. All right, so we have our item component, or items component. Now we need a service to actually fetch stuff from, using AngularFire to fetch it from FireStore. So let's generate a service. So we're going to go back to our terminal down here and say ngg service. We want it to go in a folder called services, and we're going to call this, let's call it item service. So just item. And then that generates a folder called services with a file called item.service.ts, and it gives us a class of item service. All right, so this is where we're going to basically do all of our interaction with Firebase using AngularFire. Now, when you create a service or anything, as I said before, it has to go into the app.module.ts file. Now, the component, the items component that we generated with the CLI is automatically put in here. It's imported and it's automatically put in the declarations. Services, however, are not, so we're going to have to just bring that in ourselves. So we're going to say import item service from /services/item.service. Okay, now services don't get added to declarations, they get added to providers. So we're going to add in here item service like that and save. And now we're going to go back to our service and we're going to fetch our items from AngularFire. FireStore. Jesus, there's so many different things. I get them confused sometimes. So there's a couple things we need to import from AngularFire. All right, so one is the basic Angular FireStore. All right, the next is going to be the Angular FireStore collection. Okay, which represents collections. In our case, we only have one collection, which is item, and then also something called Angular FireStore document. So let's see, Angular FireStore document, which is going to represent single documents. So when we do like an update to a single document or a delete, things like that, then we use that. And these are all going to be from, these are all going to be from AngularFire 2/FireStore. Okay, and this stuff is in the documentation, or it should be. Let's see, FireStore module. We already did that. Yeah, so this gives us kind of bits and pieces of what we're doing. Let's check this out. Documents. Yeah, see, Angular FireStore document. We're not dealing with that yet. We're dealing with collections. So right here, Angular Fire collection. All right, so anyway, now that we've brought this stuff in, the Angular FireStore, we have to inject that as a dependency into the constructor so that we can use it within our service. So we're going to say public, and then we can call it whatever we want right here. I'm going to call it AFS, and then just set it to Angular FireStore. Okay, and then let's see, we're going to add a property up here, and we're going to add a property of items collection, and we're going to set that to Angular FireStore collection, and I'm going to give that a type. Whoops, I'm going to give that a type of item. All right, so right now it doesn't know what item is, so we're going to basically just create an interface. So we're going to say interface item, and we're going to say that this should be an ID, and I'm going to put a question mark, which basically means optional. So ID, which should be a string, a title, also optional, string, and description, string. Okay, so now that red squiggly line is gone because it knows what this item type is. Now instead of putting it right in the file, I don't want to do that because I'm going to be using this interface in multiple places and other components and stuff. So what I'm going to do is in the app folder, we're going to create a folder called models, and inside models we'll create a file called item.ts. Okay, and then we're just going to grab that interface, cut it, put it in there, and then just put export in front of it so that it can be used outside of this file. So then we can just import it into our service. So we can say import item from, and it's going to be /models/item. Okay, so now it knows what this item is, and we can now use it in other files as well. Okay, so items collection we have set to the Angular FireStore collection with the type of item. Then we're also going to have a property called items, and this is going to be an observable. So we need to actually bring in the observable package from reactive extensions. So let's say import observable from reactive extensions, which is rxjs/observable. Okay, and then this items is going to have a type of observable, and it's going to be an item as well. So we can put in here item, but it's going to be an array. So we want to say item and then some brackets. Okay, and then down here in the constructor, we want to set this dot items. Okay, so we're talking about this right here. Let's set this dot items to this dot AFS, which is the Angular FireStore. Okay, we injected that right here, so it's available for us to use. And we're going to call dot collection, and we're going to set this to items, and then we're going to say dot value changes, like that. And that's what this value changes does, is it returns our collection as an observable. So if we look over here, let's see, value changes. So there's multiple ways of streaming collection data from your FireStore. Value changes is one of them. Observable data, synchronized array of JSON objects. But the thing is with this, with value changes, it doesn't give you the ID, and we're going to need the ID. So later on, we're actually going to change it to snapshot changes, which does include the ID. And there's somewhere in here that shows you when to use which one, but I'm not sure where it is. But anyways, I just want to show you an easy way to get your data. So we're just going to do this. Now there's one more method I want to create, and that's get items. So this is what we're actually going to call from our component, and all this is going to do is return this dot items. Okay, so items is being set or being initialized as an observable here with the type of item. Then we're taking it and we're setting it to a collection, the items collection dot value changes, which will send it as an observable, which is like a data stream. And then get items is just returning that. Okay, so this is all we're going to do for now. We'll save it, and then we're going to go into our items component. So let's go into component, items component TS. In order to use any of those service functions or service methods, we need to import the service. All right, so we're going to say import item service from //services / item.service. Okay, and we need to inject that as a dependency into the constructor. Okay, so for that we'll just say public, let's say public item. We can call this part whatever we want. I'm just going to say item service with a lowercase I, and then we need to set it to item service with an uppercase I, because that's what we brought in right here. Okay, actually we're going to set this to private. Alright, so now what we want to do is we want to fetch our items through the service, okay, using this get items right here. So ng-on-init is a lifecycle method that runs automatically when your component is generated. So just to show you that, I'm going to just console.log, and let's just say ng-on-init ran. And we'll save that, go back, and let's open up our console with F12 or our dev tools, and you can see ng-on-init ran, so it runs automatically, just like the constructor. Okay, although the constructor is really only supposed to be used for injecting things like services. ng-on-init is where you want to do your initializations. Okay, things like fetching stuff. So that's what we're going to do here. We're gonna call that get items from the service. And remember, that's going to be an observable. Using value changes sends it as an observable, which we need to subscribe to. So let's go back and let's say this dot item service dot get items, and then we need to subscribe, and inside this subscribe we can put whatever we want here. I'm going to call it items because that's what it's going to give us. Set it to a set of curly braces, and let's just console.log the items. Okay, and we'll go back here, and if we look down here at what's logged, you'll see we're actually fetching the data from the FireStore. We have item 1 and item 2. All right, so hopefully, I know that's kind of difficult to follow along with. Those of you that have taken my Angular 4 course, I know you know exactly what's going on. But those of you that haven't, we're just fetching data through the service using angularfire. We're returning the items as an observable, and then we're subscribing to them in our component and just logging them. All right, now obviously we don't want to just log them, we want to show them in our template here. So what we need to do is set these items as a property. So in the class right above the constructor, we're going to say items. We're going to set it to the type of item, and it's going to be an array. Now it doesn't know what item is, but remember we created the model right here. What we can do is we can import that. So we can say item from, and let's see, that's going to be what, // yeah, // twice models / oops, item. All right, so now that that's a property, what we want to do is when we get the items from the observable through this subscribe right here, we want to set them to this property. So we'll say this.items, which is accessing this right here, and we're going to set it equal to the items that are coming in from this subscription right here. All right, we'll just comment that out. So now that we have those items placed in this property, this is accessible through our template, through our HTML. Now, since it's an array, what we want to do is we want to loop through it. Okay, and we can do that using the Angular ng4 directive. So let's go to our HTML, items.component.html. Okay, we're going to get rid of this, and then we're going to put a div here, and then I just want to check to see if there actually are any items, because if there are not, then I want to do something different. I want to say basically there's no items. So we're going to do an ng if. So asterisk ng if, and we're going to set that to items question mark dot length, and we're going to say if the length is greater than 0. Okay, and then we're actually going to use something called ng template, which was new in Angular 4. It wasn't available in Angular 2. It was one of the few you know, on the surface changes. So we can say semicolon else no items. Okay, and no items is going to be the name of our template. So we're going to go down below the div and say ng template, and we're going to say hash no items, like that. All right, so if there's no items, then whatever we put in here is going to show, and I'm just going to put in an HR, and then I'm just going to put in H5, and I'm going to say there are no items to list. Okay, and then up here, if there are items, then what do we want to do? We basically just want to loop through them. So we're going to use a UL, all right, and we're going to use an ng4 to do the loop. So we'll say asterisk ng4. We want to say let item of items. Okay, now this items right here, what this is talking about is this item's property, which we set to the items coming in from the service. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to loop through those. Now we're using Materialize CSS, and for this UL, I'm just going to add a class of collection because it'll make it look better. Collection. And then inside here for the LIs, these are going to have a class, let's say collection dash item. All right, and then in here we should be able to get the item field. So remember, we have an ID, a title, and a description. So let's try to get the title. Okay, and we're going to use string interpolation with our double curly braces. So we'll say item dot title. All right, we'll save that. Let's go to our application, and there we go, item 2 and item 1, so we can get the title. So if we want the description, what I'll do is put a colon here. Actually, let's put strong tags around the title. So we'll put strong tags around it, and then we'll put space and then item dot description, like that. Okay, so now we have our item 2. This is item 2. Same thing with item 1. All right. And then these colors you're seeing, the purple and the yellow, that's because I have an extension installed called, bracket pair colorizer. It helps you not get confused, you know, what ending brackets go with what starting brackets, things like that. So don't worry about the colors if you're not seeing that. Whoops, I didn't want to close that up. All right, so now we're actually fetching this data from Firebase or from our FireStore. If I were to go to, let's get that on. If I were to go here and add another document, say title, we'll call this item 3, description, this is item 3, and save. Let's go back to our application, and you can see it's already there. I didn't even have to reload. All right, so I think this is a good place to stop now that we have basically the hard part is done in bringing in AngularFire, creating our service and all that stuff. Now one issue we do have is we don't have the ID. If I were to change item.title to item.id and save, you'll see it's not going to give it to us. In order to get the ID, we have to use, instead of value changes, we have to use snapshot changes. And then we also have to add some other stuff. We have to add a map, and then we have to do this stuff here to get the ID, which is a little confusing, but I'll show you how to do that. So let's put that back to title and save it. And yeah, we'll continue this in the next video.